Hello everyone, this is Tim, and this is going to be a response to CondorDM, who put out a couple tag videos, and there's been a lot of those lately, but they're kind of fun, so I'm going to answer some of these questions and see what I can come up with. This is going to be the one that's for players, so let's get right into it. The first one is, are you a player that also DMs or GMs? Yes. Number two, what do you prefer more, interaction and roleplay, combat, puzzles and traps, or a mix? And my preference is mostly for interaction and roleplay. I really like those campfire moments where characters are just talking to each other, or characters are talking to an NPC, or even the rare things like monsters interacting with and talking with players. I really enjoy that kind of um, thing happening in a campaign. All right, third question is, would you like to or do you think you should have say over the rules of the game you're playing as a player? So, in this aspect, maybe because I've been more of a GM, but I, I think the GM has more of a say on the rules. I usually defer to the GM that I'm playing under. I do like, however, when there's a sort of a introductory before a campaign sort of chat or maybe even discussion about what rules we're going to use, if there's any optional rules or house rules. Um, but most of the time, I usually defer to the GM's judgment on that. Mainly because I think they probably have a better idea where they want to take their campaign, what kind of feel they want to evoke with the rules. So, yeah, I'd say a little bit of say as a player, but mostly I'll leave that up to the GM. All right, question four. Would you like to, or do you think you should have say over the story and world you're playing in, or maybe a mix of both? That's kind of a tough one. I think that the say over the story, in that aspect, I want the story to pretty much emerge from the table, emerge from what the GM is doing with the NPCs and organizations in the world, as well as what the players are doing. So sort of a blend or just something that happens as a result of all of these different variables interacting with one another. As far as the world, I do like when player backgrounds can influence a campaign, influence a setting. You want to try to bring those elements into the campaign you're running. And in some games, I've had GMs that actually world build the setting as the campaign goes on, especially with input from the players. So that can be a lot of fun. But in other aspects or other different ways of playing, I guess I do like playing in very very structured campaign settings, published settings. So in those aspects, I think the player input is probably less because the world is already delineated. It's already been fleshed out for the most part, unless you pick an area that hasn't really been fleshed out in that campaign setting. And I've seen GMs do that as well. So as a player, what do I like? I guess I like both. I've done both. I had fun doing both. It's nice to have ideas that I put forward like sort of fit into a setting, or they find their way into the setting, but at the same time I enjoy playing in a fleshed out world that's already pretty much in a can. It has like the campaign, the setting name with a little R after it. So I guess I enjoy both as far as this one goes. Do I have any thoughts on railroading? And I'm pretty sure I've talked about this before, but I'll do it real quick. Also, another way of describing this is a linear plot line. As a player, I really don't like it. I like when the plot, like I said, the story just emerges. So I don't like a very fleshed out story that's sort of rigid, where someone has the beginning, middle, and end already figured out. Because how can you figure out the end without the input of the players? In those sort of situations, I think the person who wants to run a game like that should probably run more of a like a or not run, but maybe write more of like a play or a story. But at the same token, I've seen other players who do enjoy a very they do enjoy the plot that's been thought out ahead of time. I'm not one of those players. Whenever I see or feel the railroad tracks or the linearity, I sort of rebel. I don't like it. I feel trapped or pushed in a certain direction, and I don't like that very much. The only I think caveat to that is mission-based games, where maybe you're in a military operation group, maybe you're like a mercenary guild, and if there's like a strict sort of hierarchy in the actual game itself, the game world, it makes more sense to me to be given orders and to follow them. So in that sort of campaign framework or one-shot framework, I don't rebel as much. It makes more sense. It's more easily to swallow. Get a spoonful of sugar and make some medicine go down. So in those sorts of situations, I think I'm more willing to go along with a linear plot. Okay, number 6. As soon as I can bring it up here. Do you have any thoughts on campaigns and one-shots? Do you prefer one more than the other, or are you fine with either or both? Um, this is actually an interesting one for me. I enjoy both, and I think I enjoy both for different reasons. I think for campaigns, I enjoy them because the story of each character is usually longer. Unless you're playing a more lethal game, then you have multiple stories, all sort of jammed together. But I do enjoy seeing characters develop, how they change, and especially over time. Maybe their viewpoints change, their beliefs change, the things they've done sort of build up, on your character sheet. Like I slayed this, interacted with this group. You get more wisdom in the world and the setting. So I definitely enjoy all of those things. Like I enjoy TV shows where, it's not very episodic. Like the characters, something that they did last session or episode actually matters in the next one. So that's I do like that in campaigns. One shots are interesting, I think, because you can be a lot more experimental. And the reason you can be more experimental is it's only for a short amount of time, 4 hours, 6 hours, whatever. So you can really just, I've never tried this before. I've never tried this optional rule. I've never tried this setting. I never tried to jam these two genres together and see what happens. How weird is that going to be? I've never hacked together like 6 different systems and rules from each of them and see how that works. So I like the experimental nature of one shots. You have a lot of freedom to just try out new ideas. It's sort of like a RPG playground where you just get these elements that you can throw together and see how it works. I also seem to put more work into one shots than I do campaigns in certain aspects, like the presentation, character sheets handmade, props on the table. I seem to, for some reason, do that more in one shots than I do in campaigns. I'm sure that you could do that in campaigns as well, but I think it's probably because I do most of my one shots at conventions where I want them to look good. I want to attract people. I want people to be envious of the people sitting in the chairs so that next year when my game comes up, people are clamoring to get into my game, have a good word of mouth for my games. So I guess for this one it's both as well. Sorry. Next question is, do I have a favorite spell casting system, and where's that from? So I think I'm probably going to say the spellcasting system from Barbarians of Lemuria. It's a sword and sorcery game that is a really free form, but they sort of give guidelines on like how much damage certain uh, there are magnitudes of spells. I think there's first magnitude, second magnitude, and third. I think there might be cantrips as well. But they sort of give guidelines on what spells like that can do. So you have, uh, you can kind of figure out what you want to cast and how it works. What I like about Barbarians of Lemuria in particular is that there's different sort of costs that you have to come up with for how to cast these spells. Like some of them are like line of sight, some of them are like sacrifice, and it gets kind of, it could be a little bit dark in places. And that sort of fits in a sword and sorcery game. But it could be easy to port that into another system and try it out. I've thought about doing that, especially since I've tried making my own systems. I always get stuck with the magic system. But yeah, Barbarians of Lemuria, or BOL as it's called, is my favorite spellcasting system. All right, let's get the next question here. What's your favorite timeline / genre? Example, World of Darkness, D&D 3.5, or Rifts. And I think he's talking about like metaplot here. And this one's a little bit tricky for me. I think it's the metaplot of Vampire the Masquerade. I'm going to go with that. And I won't really include all the other different World of Darkness games, because Vampire is pretty straightforward. It starts, especially in the like revised second edition, first edition sort of vibe. I like that there's a lot of different things included, but it isn't too hard to ignore. So you can bring a lot of those things in. You know, it's world spanning. It goes back to the beginning of time. You know, you're a descendant of Cain and Abel. So there's a lot of detail in there, and you really can include as much or as little as you want. The only trick is if you're playing as a new person in a Vampire the Masquerade game with a bunch of people that have been playing for years, have all the books, know it inside and out, it can be very daunting to get into a game like that. So that's probably one of the downsides of having a meta plot, timeline that spans really from the beginning of time until now. But yeah, Vampire the Masquerade would probably be my favorite. Okay, number 9 is what is my favorite rule set? And this is always a hard one for me. A lot of people ask me these things, and I can't even remember what I said the last time, but I think probably Lamentations of the Flame Princess it would be my favorite. It's a very pared down version of like BX D&D. Um, Alignment is vague. They have a lot of information there for the character classes, but they're not very strict. So they have benefits, but there's a lot of leeway to play them in different ways with like armor and weapons and things. So yeah, I think Lamentations is my favorite. The only trick was I'd have to modify some things because they penalize certain classes in various ways. But you know me, I like to make house rules. BRP would be my honorable mention for favorite system because it's so flexible. Basic role playing. I've run a lot of one shots with that, but strangely, I've never ran any campaigns. So I'm going to have to change that, I think, in the near future. Okay, next question. Number 10. Please share your thoughts on live play, meaning sessions recorded for YouTube, etc., podcasts. Thoughts on. Okay, we'll just do this one at a time. So on live play, I really don't watch a lot of them, and it's not really that I don't like them. It's just that they take a lot of time to keep up on. And also, if it's from a system that I know very well or a setting that I know very well, even if I might be interested in the players, I tend to tune out. I really use live plays to show me how a game works that I'm interested in and that I'm not familiar with. So if I've never played the game before, I will probably watch a session or two just to see how it works at the table. Like for instance, Fate. I watched a Fate game in person, and I really got a sort of a bad vibe from it. But I've heard a lot of people say that they like Fate, and so one of these days I'll probably watch one of those Fate one shots that I've seen like David Sems and a few other people run, just to see how they do it, how it works. But yeah, it just really comes down to timing for me, and a lot of times when I'm listening to YouTube videos, my son is making a lot of noise, so it's hard to pick up on all the details. So that can be kind of discouraging if I miss a detail and then they're talking about it later in the one shot, then I'll miss out on what's actually happening. So yeah, I'll watch them if I want to know more about a system or if I want to know more about a setting that I'm, curious about. Thoughts on public gaming, meaning face-to-face gaming, gaming in public. I do this well, I've done this in the past. I'm actually planning to go back to my convention in November, GaspCon in Pittsburgh. So I'm looking forward to that. And I played and ran games at my gaming club. And the one thing I've seen with that is that bad players can get into your game. You have to be more flexible. And bad gamers is sort of that's sort of a very broad brush to paint people with. I've seen people that need maybe to lose a few bad habits. And through the course of play, I've seen players change. So maybe that's a better way to do that. Just behaviors that could be removed, and they'd be a good player. So thoughts on private gaming, meaning it like home away from the public. I really miss being able to do this. I used to play once a week with some guys in my local area. I don't know if I can really do it at my house anymore because of space issues with my daughter taking over my gaming room. There's a single tier, but she's got a bedroom now, so that's cool. But it's very comfortable to run a game in your house. You have all the beverages, food that you want. You can set things up beforehand. You can do things with atmosphere and candles and music that's hard to do in public gaming. Um, do I prefer one more than the other? You know, that's a good question. I I wish that I could probably do more private gaming. That's probably my preferred way, but I also these questions are tough. I do enjoy running the games for people abroad, out there where people can see what's going on, because I do enjoy that interaction. So again, this is one where I'm both. I enjoy both for different reasons. I think I enjoy public gaming because I can get exposed to new ideas and new players, different types of people. In private games or games like, even like online that I'm playing with people that I invite and pick out, those experiences are great. You don't usually have as many problem players or problem behaviors, so that can be fun in a different way. So, yeah, I'm both on this one too. Okay, number 11. Are there any movies, TV shows, or novels, etc., that you would like either to see ideas stolen from or made into a game, maybe a bit of both? There's a lot of sort of ideas out there that are in movies and TV shows that I'd like. For instance, I'm watching a TV show now called The Returned, and it's a very sort of light, supernatural, modern show where people are coming back to life and no one knows why, and bad things are starting to happen around the town. Like a herd of deer is found floating in a river because they appear to have drowned themselves. So, I think that would be kind of a cool thing to have in either a one shot or a campaign. I think a campaign would be kind of like a slow burn. And if I did something like that, it would sort of be, I don't know, it's more of a mundane maybe setting that I'm used to running, where yes, there's supernatural stuff going on, but it's very subdued. It's there, and they're trying to figure out the mysteries of how it works or why. Why are people coming back from the dead? Um, I was actually thinking the other day about mundane settings and maybe like a show like Law and Order, how that would work out at the table. I think a lot of people like that supernatural, like magic and otherworldly things, especially in role-playing games. So that would be an interesting experiment for me to see how something like that would work. So there you go. The Returned and Law and Order. Those would be some TV shows that I'd like to see in a campaign perhaps and see how that would work. Okay, next question. I think this is number 12. What are some negative things other players do that ruin your experience with this type of gaming? Also, why does this stuff spoil it for you? Some of these questions are worded a little bit weird, but I think I'm figuring out what Condor wants here. So what things really bug me about other players? I think spotlight hogging. Spotlight hogging. Sorry, I'm really exhausted. That can bother me sometimes. Um, if they're talking over the GM when the GM is trying to describe something, that probably bothers me more than anything. Disrespect to the GM, not paying attention, being distracted by other things and not paying attention. So here would be a good example of doing something and yet paying attention. Like, for instance, I like to take notes and I like to sort of do a campaign summary as we go along. So that kind of keeps me focused on what's happening, but yet giving me something to do as a player. I found that when I'm a player, I need more since I'm so used to juggling all the balls on a GM. So that is a way that I've found to stay focused and yet feel productive at the same time. I also tend to doodle sometimes, but I find that I'm a very good listener while I draw. Because while my eyes are focused, my ears are focused on what's actually happening in the table around me. But I do like to stay in the game and interact with each other. So that maybe that's another one too. When players don't interact with other players, they don't interact with the NPCs. They're sort of detached. And a lot of these things you can get better at. So if you're like this, don't feel like you're never going to get better or whatever. But yeah, it's something I think we should probably work on as a player is to stay focused. And I think that's probably harder as the younger generations come up. They seem to be they get bored or distracted easily. I don't know if it's because of things like YouTube, but and video games or whatever. But yeah, paying attention. I wish people would pay attention more and just try to stay focused. Okay. This next question I think I've answered somewhere else before too. Negative things DMs or GMs do that ruin your experience. Also, why does this stuff spoil it for you? I think there was just a video that I did recently that went over this, but GMs at railroad and don't give players freedom to do things. Um, Overly penalizing someone for trying something new or trying to experiment on something. I think I do prefer systems that let the players try different things, and the GM just has to come up with a role. I think sometimes certain GMs can get flustered when there's no mechanic or system element that can be used to solve whatever the player wants to try to do. And I guess sometimes when GMs do that, I get a little bugged by it. Like, don't let the rules inhibit your ability to run the game. Come up with something, make a ruling, and then later, if it's still bugging, you can go back and look it up later. So you would know in the future. Maybe like grappling rules, or you're gonna jump off a cliff on the back of the back of the dragon's neck, try to attack it. Stuff like that. Um, so I guess in some ways I do like cinematic things happening in the game, although I tend to lean more towards the realism side of things, even though we're playing role playing games in settings that aren't very realistic. Um, yeah, so I'll try to find the link to that DM video where I complain and link it down below. Okay, next question. What, if anything, can drive you away from the game? And let me just think about some personal experiences. When people have problems with one another, be it political, cultural, uh, personality clashes, sometimes those can get very out of hand. Relationship issues. I think I've left I think at least one game because of where the GM and one of the players were actually married and they would just fight like right in front of us in the middle of a game. That was very awkward. Um, I've also left groups, I guess, when they change a setting or they don't really get the input from the players before changing a setting. Uh, oh, like once I showed up to play a Changing the Lost game, and it ended up being a Werewolf the Forsaken game. And I don't know what it is about Werewolf World of Darkness games, but I just don't get into them. I don't. It's not my thing. Like for Eunice out there, Hammer Chitsteak, he's all about Werewolf, and more prop to him, man. You found a game you love, that's awesome. But me personally, I've just never really got into Werewolf. At least the idea of like World of Darkness werewolves. It's not for me for some reason. But so maybe if that happens, I tried playing like, all right, I'll play in a werewolf game, but it was sort of like I felt like the carpet got tugged out from under me. All right, the last question is actually worded, so I don't actually know what Condor wants. What got you into playing this type of game? So I'm not, yeah, I don't know what type of game he wants me to talk about, but I'll just, it's. I remember watching the video when I jotted down all these questions, and I can't remember this one in particular. I should have watched that before I tried to film this, but so be it. I'm going to talk about just I like to play different types of games, like OSR, old school Renaissance games. I play like World of Darkness games. I like modern supernatural. Um, there's story games I'll play from time to time that are sort of focused on a particular type of setting. Like Dogs in the Vineyard is like supernatural western with religious elements thrown in there, so it's a very unique sort of game to try to play, and I enjoy playing it. Uh, OSR games I enjoy playing, I think, because of the very pared down, rules light nature of the games, especially games like Labyrinth Lord, Lamentations of Flame Princess. World of Darkness games, I really like that D10 dice pool, and whenever I think of modern games in general, I just think of World of Darkness. So if I ever ran that Law and Order game I talked about before, maybe I would do World of Darkness, Law and Order. So that might be kind of strange playing World of Darkness without supernatural elements, but I'd be willing to give that a try. And last is number 16. Who am I going to tag? How about, I don't know, all of you? There's certain people out there that I'd be interested to hear from, but honestly, I don't even know if they listen to my and watch my listen to my videos or watch them. But how about Tetsubu 57, Gentleman Gamer, um, Geez, who else is out there? URLDM, uh, Mr. Juice. And really, if you're watching this and if you made it this far, feel free to answer these questions and see what you can come up with. All right, thanks a lot. I'll talk to you later.